Hello, everyone. I'm Selene Yang. I'm going to be talking a little bit about collaborative geofeminism, the experiences from Geochicas. I come from the National University of La Plata. I'm a PhD candidate in the social communications program. I'm also a fellow in the Latin American Initiative for Open Data, and I'm a co-founder and coordinator of the initiative of Geochicas. So let's start with a little bit of what Geochicas is. This is the map on where we are right now currently in the world. This didn't start as you see it right now. At the beginning, we started out as 10 women back in 2016. It started as a Spanish-speaking group of women mappers in OpenStreetMap. Now it has come to also opening a chapter of English-speaking women, and not only in OpenStreetMap, but also in the OSGeo community. We have developed and carried out several projects, learned and shared knowledge with many amazing women and allies. And right now, as it is, we're more than 300 women from around 27 countries trying to map all the things that are of our interest right now. So moving on to the next slide. This is something that we encounter when we started in Geochicas. We say like there's a lot of data, geodata out there, but there wasn't enough diversity, not only in the data itself, but also in the community. As you see here, only 3% of all OpenStreetMap contributors are women. This data is from 10 years back, and the gender gap in the mapping community, let's be frank, in most of the tech-related communities hasn't changed that much, even though this data is from 10 years back. And we do recognize that we're at a better place right now than when we were back then, but there's still much that we're doing, and there's still much that we can still do. And when we say that there's not enough diversity in data, what does that mean and why is this important? Is how come gender diversity within mapping is something that we need to talk about. And when it starts affecting the access to knowledge or information that we can produce or also get from the map, it's when this starts becoming a problem. And also how all of this data is produced and how the mapper that's producing this is situated within their own privileges, contexts, biases. And this is something that we're going to discuss a little further in the presentation. But what we're trying to say here is that we're not seeing many things that we need to see represented in the map and in the communities of practice that we belong. An example of this would be this, for example. What you see here are vending machines. The first one is for feminine hygiene and the other products, and the other one is for condoms. And as you can see, there are only 10 points of interest mapped for feminine hygiene vending machines and more than 1,000 for condom machines. What does this mean? It means that feminine hygiene vending machines are in women's bathrooms and condom machines are placed in men's bathrooms. And for example, the feminist and gender geographies, what we try to do is that we seek to analyze the existing relationships between gender and the space, right? And how these relationships have a meeting point within the different spatial variations and within the space itself, right? So the cartographic representations make these variations visible insofar as the spaces have relations that produce hierarchies and internal social rules that always place women in a disadvantaged position. This means that if there are less women mapping, there are most of the time less points of interest that would represent our needs. Like this slide example, right? Remember, and again, where are these condom machines located and why are they only located in men's bathrooms? This data, as I was telling you, it was pulled from the OSM tag info page from today. And I've used this same example for the past 3 years, and the numbers for the feminine hygiene vending machines haven't changed a bit. A little bit of what we do from Geochicas and from my research is we need to discuss about the role, participation of and representation of women in geo communities. What does this mean? We need to analyze the role in decision-making spaces of women, the participation of women within the community's activities and projects, and also the representation of women interests, not only in the community agenda, but also in the production of data, as we could see back in the slide about vending machines, right? So if we're not there out there mapping the things that are of our interest, nobody's going to do it for us, basically. And a little bit of what we're doing to close this gender gap within the geo communities is that, for example, in the role of women in the community, and also the participation of women in the community, we set out to have like different kind of events, and we also try to gather more women to discuss about what their projects are, what their fears are whenever whenever coming into the community, what are their fears, their challenges whenever they come here, not only to OpenStreetMap, but also in other tech communities. And this is something that we created that's called Geochicas Take. And this is something, a pre-event that we do in most of the geo events that we participate in, is that we create a pre-event so that all women and whoever perceives themselves as women can come together and meet and discuss. Most of the times, many of these women are first timers, first comers, in this kind of events and spaces. And most of them don't know anybody else, or they're kind of afraid to approach others. So this is like a good place for them to start getting to know each other, sharing their experiences, sharing their common challenges. And for us, it has been really relevant in the community, and also to empower women to understand that we're not alone in this, and that are many of us out there trying to create like a safer and better place for them to come. A little bit about the production of geodata with a feminist perspective is that seeking a critical view from feminism towards digital cartographies and the production of open spatial data is an essentially collective practice rather than an individual practice. It's like a possibility of creating an infinite network of possibilities of multiplied differences. This is a quotation by Coelho. In this way, like these possibilities seek to account for multiple scenarios as points of articulation immersed in these complex dynamics of social relations and community relations and personal relations, claims also and representation of the mappers from and with the territories that we are working with, right? Which allows us to be manifested and allows also to these representations to be manifested in the real conditions of existence. From an ethic perspective, when we think about and when discussing around ethic conventions when mapping, for example, and when we're creating this geodata with a feminist perspective, although there's still many conventions, right, when mapping, and most of them lack that intersectionality aspect of it. And what do I mean by this is that even though you can have a convention when mapping, for example, vulnerable subjects, humanitarian mapping practices, this doesn't necessarily reflect the intersecting points that are also present in space. For example, mapping refugees, mapping collapsed buildings in a disaster, right? Where do you see gender there? You are trying to have like a homogeneous subject that you're mapping. And what happens if we need to put other dimensions into consideration, for example, gender-related violence in the refugee camps, or who's more affected by an earthquake when inhabiting informal settlements, or even in more day-to-day practices, like for example, mapping schools. How does this affect the living costs for single mothers, for example? How does this gentrify neighborhoods, or how does this affect mobility for women? For example, accessing to public transportation. And also, those are like the kind of questions that we're trying to find also answers to based on the principle that nothing about us without us. A little bit of the production of geodata with a gender and feminist perspective is something that we've been working on for this past 4 years, that Geochicas, from the time that Geochicas has been created. And we've done several editathons or mapathons to gather information that's related to women's interests and needs. For example, we did a regional editathon and mapathon for health services for women. We also did a regional mapathon for the OpenStreetMap 13th anniversary in Latin America. The Mapathon was in Latin America. The 13th anniversary was worldwide. But why we did it in mapping informal settlements, it's because in these places, the ones that are more affected are usually women because they're the ones that are staying home instead of men that go out to work, and also kids, right? And we've also created and another thing that's really interesting of what we're doing, trying to create more capacity building spaces, is that we created also safe learning spaces for women to come together and also share their experiences. So we created like a format of webinars before pandemia, before the explosion of all the webinars every day. That is Geochicas sharing knowledge and also having allies come to us and also share their knowledge, because we have realized that most of the times that we needed something, we always go out and seek a male colleague, for example, that would help us do whatever that we needed. But now what we decided is that, okay, we have this ton of information, we have this ton of knowledge, let's share it between us first. And then if we still need something else, we'll go out and seek an ally for this. And also a little bit about the projects that we're doing is this is something called the Streets of Women. And it's a project led by Jessica Sena from Geochicas as well. She's the technical coordinator of it. And it started out as a project for the International Women's Day. And we wanted to do is that we wanted to visualize, give visibility to streets that were named after women in different countries and in different cities. And this is also a project that's linked to Wikipedia. So we're not only counting the streets that are named after men or women, but we're also getting the percentages of how many of these streets that are named after women also have their article in Wikipedia. So if you go, for example, in Argentina, if you go to Buenos Aires, which is like a really awesome example, what they have here is that there's a whole neighborhood that's called Puerto Madero, and they have like all of the streets are named after women. But you can also see that the country has the city has a low amount of streets named after women. The green ones are named after men, and the yellow ones are named after women. And you see here 93.9% of the streets are named after men, 6.1% are named after women. And from that percentage of streets named after women, 67.7 of the 67, let's round it. That means 86 of the streets have an article in Wikipedia and 41 don't have one, right? And that's a project that we've done in many other countries, in many other cities and countries. I'm gonna just go back a little quick. And this is an ongoing project, so this is also open for collaboration. So if you're interested in collaborating with this, you can always contact us and we can guide you through the process on how to create the data sets, and you can send them to us and we can put it up there. And we have also seen that there are many cities that have a lot of names of women in their streets, but most of them are named after saints. So you can also see like there's something there that, for example, science and history is still making us invisible, instead of what we're having here is religious streets. That is something that we are trying to see and understand what's happening on the next phase of this project, crossing fingers, is that we're trying to see how many relevant, for example, avenues are named after women, instead of just like these small secondary roads or secondary passages or secondary streets. But that's something for the future, and maybe for the next meeting next year, and maybe we can all see our faces there. So yeah, that's Barcelona. You can see Madrid as well. There's the whole repository of the code. It's also on our GitHub in the GitHub Geochicas, and you can find it there. But you can see here like all of the countries that we have, and we haven't done any country that has streets in English, because our dictionary right now it's only in Spanish. But we're also, that's another phase of the project in which we're gonna try to see if we can actually add another language in the dictionary of names. This is another project that we created together, and this is what I mean when we say that the only way in which we can do this is being collaborative. Is, I don't know if many of you or any of you saw the Rapist in Your Path performance that was done from Las Tesis from Chile, from Valparaiso, Chile, and they were named by one of the this year's one of the most important person of the 2020. And this is an initiative from Geochicas, but led by Isaura Faura. She's also from the from an international feminist group. And what we did here is that we collected all of the places in which this performance was done. And this is also an ongoing project because they're still doing it in some places, but it kind of stopped a little bit because of the pandemic. But as you can see here, it's been a really huge performance. And what this did is that it started visualizing what women are doing outside in space and how we're actually claiming back the public space as well. And that's a little bit about what we're doing, right? And all of the projects. And these are just some of the projects that we're doing. We've been together for 4 years and hopefully many more years to come. But those were just a couple of examples of the things that we're doing right now. And I want to close with this quote from Kitchen, Robert Kitchen. He has this concept about maps being post-representational. And it says that maps are of the moment brought into being through practices embodied, social and technical, always remade every time they're engaged with. Mapping is a process of constant reterritorialization. As such, maps are transitory and fleeting, being contingent, relational, and context dependent. Maps are practices. They are always mapping spatial practices enacted to solve relational problems. And with this, I mean that we need to start examining the practices of mapping and how maps are in a constant state of becoming, not only to represent the world, but also in how we build the world. Maps do not emerge in the same way to all of us, as Kitchen also says. They are contextualized and situated in concrete moments in time, and how we should also start reflecting on the practice of mapping. Where is it coming from whom it's coming from, and not only the objective nature of the map as a somehow representation of the world that's built by just a few. And with that, I just want to say thank you. And you can find me at Twitter at Señorita Peperina, or you can, if you're interested of participating in Geochicas, or if you want to collaborate in any of our projects, you can send us an email. Well, you can send it to my email and then I can share with the community. It's seleneyang1@gmail.com. And you can also find us on Twitter at Geochicas OSM. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Selena. That was a super informative, inspiring, and only a little bit infuriating talk. Getting a lot of love in the Slack channel as well. A lot of people have, of course, asked how they can get involved. And I see that you've posted sort of a couple of GitHub repos. And I mean, I think it's very interesting. Of course, Geochicas started in South America, and it makes sense that you have a lot of Spanish-speaking members. But yeah, I think a lot of people from NACIS would love to contribute. So if you can speak to that a little bit, that'd be great.
Actually, one of the main reasons why we started as a Spanish-speaking group, it's because from a political perspective and from an access to knowledge perspective, many things and many conversations weren't happening in Spanish. So for us, it was really important to first get all of us together and start these kind of conversations in a place where we felt like it was more natural for us in how to talk about what we were going through with this, right? And also something that happened just recently during the FOSS4G last year in Bucharest is that we launched our English speaking channel on Telegram. So you can all join there, and you can also follow us on Twitter. And we always post things in Spanish and English. And something that I didn't say, that it would be really interesting for all of you to get an idea of the kind of work that we do regarding not things that only happen to the Spanish-speaking communities, that we did an international survey about gender representation in the OpenStreetMap community. And it's also about different kind of relations that you see in the community when it comes to women and underrepresented groups there. And I can share it over Slack if you all want it, later today. And you can see we haven't done the analysis of the results, but you can see all the all of the results and all of the data there.
Yeah, I'm sure would be really interesting, and just a really great reminder of why it's so important to have things available in multiple languages and accessible to people just for a comfort level, and that leads to so many different things, accessibility with data and things like that. I think we need to move on to our next speakers, but I just wanted to thank you again for being here, Selene, and yeah, you can find her on Twitter, on Slack, and all of those things. So thank you again.
Thank you all for having me. Have a great day.